Hi, thank you for joining me in the Louie file. I am starting a series. I like to do little series because I like to make the videos short enough where you can grab a hold of them quickly, but the Bible is such a broad subject matter, and so I like to do little snippets, little pieces here. We're going to start today. This might be considered a part two. First one would have been Jesus is God, or Jesus is I am, part one, and this will be Jesus is I am, part two. In the first one, I explained how I had a young man come to me and tell me he didn't think Jesus was God. He thought he was the Son of God, but not God himself. So eventually I discovered that he just simply didn't believe in the Trinity. And I'm like, well, so we discussed how it was a mysterious thing that God becomes man, but it is the plan, and it's very clearly laid out in the Scriptures, and specifically in the Gospel of John, let me just say as a whole. But there are 7 major statements in the Gospel of John where Jesus says, I am. And then he describes or defines an aspect of what I am is in him, or who he is in the flesh. John chapter 6 starts off where a familiar story to Bible students that a lot of people were coming to Jesus who were sick and in need of things, and he was healing them and making them whole. And eventually there's this massive crowd of thousands of people staring at Jesus, and he's thinking, whoa, these people are going to get hungry. And so he tested his disciples and he said, how are we going to feed all these people? Well, the story unfolds that a little boy comes up with some fish and some bread, and Jesus prays, and it multiplies the food, and the disciples get to hand it out to the crowds of thousands of people. They all ate all they needed and all they wanted, and then there were leftovers. So Jesus tells the disciples to pick up the remains, and all the people are going, yes, and they're trying to make Jesus their king. They're trying to force him to be their king, and why not? Who wouldn't want him as king? I mean, if he's the king, then the kingdom has come, and we will never have to hunger again, and he'll provide for all of us, and it'll just be a wonderful time. Well, Jesus was not interested in setting up an earthly kingdom, at least not at this point. If you're a Bible student, you might say, but Louie, he is going to set up a kingdom on the earth. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's not what we're talking about today. So Jesus started to give them this little lesson in John 6, like 26, 27, right in there. He's telling them, don't spend all your effort and energy to work for food that's going to perish. In other words, don't think that life itself is made up of the next sandwich. And that's not all there is to it. You know, the Apostle Paul in Philippians talked about how there were people that were enemies of the cross, and he said that their gods were their bellies, or in some translations, their God was their appetite. The need for food and earthly sustenance was all that drove them. And, you know, that's not much more than just being an animal, is it? So Jesus he's God in the flesh. He's on the scene. He's trying to turn people's minds and hearts toward the eternal, toward the spiritual, toward the unseen realm. And for the most part, they're not having it. They're not getting it. You know what? And the Bible clearly tells us a few different times in the Gospel of John where they couldn't get it. They simply couldn't, because they didn't have the Spirit of God in them to discern or to interpret what Jesus was really all about. But nonetheless, Jesus tells them these things anyway. In John 6, he starts to tell them that he came out of heaven. He came from heaven. And he says that our forefathers ate manna in the wilderness, but they all still died. I mean, it didn't keep them alive forever. John 6:32, Jesus then said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, Lord, always give us this bread. And here it is, John 6:35, the first of these great I am statements. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will certainly not cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of him who sent me, that all of that he has given me I lose nothing. How about that? But raise it up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who beholds the Son and believes in him will have eternal life, and I myself will raise him up on the last day. Man. So Jesus is telling us here, he came from heaven. He's a heavenly being, but yet he's standing in front of them in human form. Wow. So he is the Son, and he does have a Father. But it's interesting. If you look way back with me just for a moment in Isaiah chapter 9 to what I believe is clearly a prophecy of Jesus coming. In Isaiah 9 verse 6 says, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us." So the child is born, Jesus, the little baby, born of the Virgin Mary, but the Son is given. Well, the Son is not born in this sense. He is given because he is eternal. The Son has always been. And it says, "And the government will rest on his shoulders." And then it says, "And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace." How about that? Mighty God and Eternal Father. So there's a sense that Jesus is the Son, but he's also, I believe, one with the Father in such a way, and the Trinity is the best way that anyone has come to define it so far, I think. I'm not going to sit here and go round and round trying to determine and decipher for you what the Trinity is, but I will say this. In the beginning of the Gospel of John, it talks about the Word was with God and the Word was God. And then later on in the Gospel of John, Jesus promises the Spirit. So one of the best ways I've come to understand the Trinity is Father, Son, Spirit, thought, word, and deed. So in other words, the Father had a thought, and it was expressed as the Son, the Word, and then the Word, Jesus, offers the Spirit, or the Spirit is the one that performs the deed. He's the one that does whatever is going to be done. In fact, Jesus tells us on several occasions in the Gospel of John, "My teaching's not my own. I only say what I hear my Father say." He said, "It's not really me doing the works, but it's the Father in me, and he's doing the works." So there's this Trinity of Father, Son, Spirit, thought, word, and deed that is constantly being revealed to us in the Gospel of John. And today, what I want you to see is, he says, "I am the bread of life." And each time Jesus used this term, "I am," it got him into more trouble with the religious leaders, because those folks knew what he was saying. And he was saying, "I am." He's invoking the name of God that God gave to Moses way back in the Exodus. He says, "I am," and then he's saying, "I came down from heaven." It's pretty strong statements. But he's saying that you need to hunger for me. You need to receive me as the bread of life. We all, in the human sense, need earthly sustenance for earthly bodies, no doubt about it. But you don't want to spend all of your energy just chasing after something to stop the growl in your physical stomach. We need to be pursuing the one and only bread of life, who will satisfy the growl in our spirit. So I hope this is helping you. I hope you're enjoying this. Tune in next time. We're going to look at another "I am" statement and discuss a little bit about what that means. I hope you'll join me then. Thanks for watching.